think the Porsche Cayenne has always been looked at as the sportier, practical SUV option. You know, with the turbo coming out, that was quite ahead of the game with the performance it offered for the SUV market. But you know, is it the best of both worlds, or is it a compromise? Alright guys, welcome to this 2010 957 Porsche Cayenne GTS. I think with the first thing to start with on these is the looks. They're a wee bit polarising, particularly the 955. You know, the front end on that car is very hit or miss, or very Marmite, depending on who you ask. So they updated, you know, the looks of the car, I think in 2006, 2007 possibly, to the 957, which particularly to the front end makes a huge difference. For me personally, I think with the rear of the car, it's 50-50 which one you prefer. I prefer the 955 rear end to this. I don't know why, something about it just looks a wee bit less fussy and plain almost, but you know, not in a boring way. It's just a bit more minimalist than this car with, you know, it's kind of got a diffuser at the bottom, there's a wee spoiler, the lights have got a kind of white area in them for the indicators and reverse light, just small wee touches to, you know, the not confuse the look, but they just, you know, there's just a lot more wee pieces going on, which I don't think helps helps it look any better. With the front though, you know, I think when the 955 or the first Porsche Cayenne first came out, that was, you know, one of the big talking points on it was how it looked. I think it was based on, you know, the Boxster or the 996 at the time. You know, with the front end, they tried to create that sort of family front end across the range of cars, and it just didn't work on the Cayenne at all. It did look really disproportioned. The lower half of the bumper was usually done in grey as well, and you often seen them in grey. You know, it was done in black plastic, sorry, and you often seen the cars themselves in grey. And it just looked like there was a section missing at the bottom of the bumpers, which makes them look really high compared to the rest of the car. So it was a little bit awkward and, you know, mismatched the front end. But with the facelift for the 957, it does look a lot better. And then on the 957, for the GTS and the turbos, they gave them a slightly different front bumper again, which again just looks one step better. They look slightly less dated compared to the standard 957. You know, with the LED sort of DRL strips running horizontally in the front grills versus vertically on the base cars. That small change does make a bit of a difference to help them, you know, stay looking up to date. I think the interior in this car is largely unchanged between the 955 and the 957, but I mean, I think it's aged really well inside. I mean, the quality overall, everything feels quite sturdy. There's a few creaks starting about in the car. You know, it's 13 years old, so things will wear a wee bit. But overall, the build quality feels really good. I know these are based on the Q7 or the Touareg, you know, platform, so I'm not sure how, you know, compared to them, you know, is the build quality the same throughout, or did they take another step for the Porsche to, you know, to help distinguish it into that slightly higher price market? But you know, it's certainly worn really well. There's no, you know, there's nothing here that's, you know, looks particularly worn out. But you know, the way the interior looks, it doesn't look, you know, 13 years old. It's classic Porsche dials and you know, sort of instrument cluster and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, they've kept that going, obviously, from, you know, from years before this car to, you know, right up to date. And although the gauges may be digital now in the later cars, you know, the layout's largely the same and it's still recognisable as Porsche. personally, like, the interior is what keeps this car looking the most fresh and up to date. It still looks like a modern Porsche inside, and it's worn really well. This car's done 136,000 miles, and you know, you'd be hard pushed to know that from looking around the interior. So this car being the GTS, it comes with the 4.8 V8 non-turbo engine, producing around 400 horsepower. I think it's 405 in the book. And I think there's a few chassis changes to orientate this car more towards a sportier drive than the kind of usual 4x4 type of chassis characteristics. Now, the engine itself feels strong enough, certainly. And it picks up speed quite well for a big car. I think it's 2.2 tons these are roughly. It's not fast particularly. Well, you'll be faster than 90% of things on the road, but it's not like blow you away fast. It just feels very quick, and then particularly for the size. Makes a decent noise as well. Standard V8, everybody wants the noise for the V8, so it ticks those boxes. But this being and I don't know if this is specific to the GTS, but the way it's leaned slightly more into a sportier driver's type car for a 4x4 or SUV, I'm just not convinced that it does it well enough, to be honest. I don't think it gives you the best of both worlds, if I'm truly honest. It does feel like a bit of a compromise compared to the Discovery 3 that we've got. You'll never get the sporty drive from that, but that does everything a 4x4 should do. And I don't know if I'd sacrifice as much of the practicality or comfort or ride quality for slightly sportier driving in a 2.2 ton high centre of gravity, big family bus like this. I just don't think it's worth the sacrifice, to be honest. We're on 295/35 profile tyres, and you feel everything almost. I know this is an air suspension, so it will be soaking up something, so I dread to think what the coil sprung cars are like. But it just seems like you're taking, a really good practical platform and just giving it a lot of bad characteristics of a sporty car, which I just don't think you want, to be honest. It's okay having the big engine with a bit of speed for overtaking or getting up to speed and all that kind of stuff. But having the sporty chassis stuff with the low profile tyres, I think it makes it a worse car overall. In terms of running costs and reliability, I think the Cayennes are they are pretty good cars. They're pretty reliable and they're pretty reasonable when it comes to what you should expect. When it comes to common faults and running costs, what you should expect to be paying out for maintenance and repairs and general running. Certainly compared to the Discoveries, I think the Discovery and Range Rover platforms are a bit more costly to maintain. I don't think there's too many common fault or weak points on these cars. There's a few small items. I think the starter motor is quite a common thing to be mindful of and needing replaced after a certain amount of time. But although I wouldn't say it's a wear item, it's certainly these kind of things, they do wear out eventually. You know, they can't go forever. So, but it's quite a common thing with the Cayenne, so something to be mindful of when you're looking at one. And the air suspension on this is more reliable than the Range Rovers, I'm sure. I don't see or hear many horror stories of, you know, the system failing for whatever reason, whether it's ride height sensors, valve blocks, air lines, the bags themselves. I just don't see many people running into as many issues as with the Land Rovers and Range Rovers. The engine is probably the scariest thing when you're looking at one of these. You know, it's a big engine, V8, so 8 cylinders, so there's more of everything. Injectors, spark plugs, coils, things like that. But you know, I think the coils are a bit of a weak point in there. But again, you know, you can't expect everything to last forever. So you will, you know, if you're looking at a higher miles car, you will potentially look at replacing those. But I think the engine overall is pretty bulletproof. The central drive shaft bearing is actually quite a common thing. That's something most cars need that done, you know, quite early on in life. I think somewhere between, you know, but at that kind of 75,000 mile mark, you know, you start hearing people mention them. But other than, you know, some electrical things in the engine bay, those starter motor on the early cars in the 955, you know, the coolant system. And I think this may only be specific to the turbos. There's 3 coolant pipes that run under the inlet manifold. Those are made of plastic and they get brittle with the heat cycles like anything else in there. They break, deteriorate over time, and start leaking coolant into the engine bay. So the first thing is you're losing coolant, which can then lead to overheating issues potentially if you don't spot it. But the starter motor lives right underneath those, so then that starts affecting your starter motor. So, you know, that's something to be mindful of in the early cars and potentially only the turbos. But, you know, considering the cost of these cars, the complexity when they were new, the age they're getting to, the amount of miles that are potentially, you know, getting put on them now, that's a relatively small and pretty reasonable list of things to expect to have to fix at some point. You know, in terms of, you know, practicality, with this being a, you know, the big 4x4 SUV type car, I can only really compare it to the Land Rovers and Range Rovers, the Discovery we've got, and the L322 that's been on the channel briefly. It's just, they two cars are in a league of their own compared to this when it comes to practicality. They don't offer you that sportiness that this does, but like I said, you know, the compromise to have that is just absolutely no way worth it. I would far rather have the practicality of those two cars and sacrifice that this car is slightly better at going around corners, but ultimately still not very good at going around corners anyway, so what's the point? The only thing I would take from this car and put it into either of those would be the engine. It sounds good, plenty of power for getting up to speed. More reliable than certainly the Discovery 2.7 or the V6 in general, the 3 litre or the 2.7. So more reliable than those. That's probably the only thing that I would happily take from this car into the Discovery. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a wee like and subscribe. You know, get some other cars coming in the background. Some things with the disco coming, a bit of off-roading and things like that. Yeah. Thanks for watching.